9 months after I cut off my best friend of 15 years for what he did, his wife showed up at my door with a folder full of bank statements and told me I needed to see what he'd been doing with my money. I didn't invite her in right away. I stood in the doorway of my condo in Hamilton and looked at her, red around the eyes, coat still on from outside, January cold coming off her like she'd been standing in it for a while, and I thought, here we go. But let me back up. Because none of this makes sense without the 11 months before it. My best friend. I'll call him my best friend, because that's what he was. For 15 years, since we were 22 and working the same construction site in Brantford. His name is Kyle. We grew up in the same neighborhood, played on the same hockey team, went to each other's weddings. When I opened my renovation company 8 years ago, Kyle was the first person I called. He came in as my business partner, handled the books and client relations while I ran the sites. It worked. For 6 years, it genuinely worked. My wife knew something was off before I did. She's sharp that way. Last March she said, "Have you actually looked at the accounts lately?" And I said I trusted Kyle, and she gave me that look. The one where she doesn't push, just files it away. I should have listened. In April I came back early from a job in Burlington. We'd hit a supply delay, subcontractors sent home early, nothing to do on site. I went straight to the office. We shared a space above a print shop on Barton Street. And I heard Kyle on the phone through the door. The door wasn't fully closed. He was talking in that low, careful voice people use when they don't want to be heard. "It'll clear by Friday. The other account? No, he doesn't check that one." I pushed the door open. Kyle looked up. He didn't look guilty. He looked irritated, like I'd walked in on something private. I said, "What account?" He said, "Work account. Just sorting out a supplier issue." I let it go. I don't know why. Maybe because it was Kyle. Maybe because 15 years of trust is hard to just set down. But I went home that night and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and actually looked. Really looked. For the first time in probably 2 years, because I'd trusted him completely with the financial side. What I found took me about 3 hours to piece together. And by the time I understood it, it was past midnight and my wife had come downstairs twice to ask if I was coming to bed. Kyle had been running a second set of books. Small amounts at first. A few hundred here, a materials invoice there, slightly inflated, and the difference redirected to a numbered account I hadn't known existed. Over 4 years, it added up to just under $280,000. Canadian, gone. I didn't confront him that night. I called my accountant the next morning, a woman I'd used since we started, and I walked her through what I'd found. She went quiet for a long time and then she said, "You need a lawyer before you do anything else." I had a lawyer by the end of the week. I had a forensic accountant 2 days after that. And then, I sat on it. For 3 weeks I sat on it, went to work, acted normal, watched Kyle sit across from me at our shared desk, and talk about spring contracts and bid estimates. And I felt something I can only describe as a kind of cold, settling stillness. Like the moment before a controlled demolition when everything's in place and you're just waiting for the signal. I told my wife. I told no one else. Not my brother, not my dad, not the guys on my crew. My wife said, "Whatever you decide to do, I'm with you." That was it, no drama, no telling me what to do. Just I'm with you. That helped more than I can explain. My lawyer's advice was to document everything, pursue civil recovery, and file a report with Hamilton Police Service. The civil claim was going to take time. The police report, I filed it in early May. Kyle was interviewed. He denied it then. The forensic accountant finished her report and suddenly there was less to deny. I didn't fire him the day I filed the report. I waited until the evidence was airtight, until my lawyer said we had everything we needed. And then I sent Kyle a letter. Through the lawyer, not personally. Informing him his partnership was terminated effective immediately, that I was pursuing full civil recovery, and that he should not contact me or my wife. He called me 12 times that day. I declined everyone. Then the family stuff started. Kyle's family and my family had been intertwined for years. His parents knew my parents, his sister had been at my wedding, his wife, her name is Marcy. She and my wife had been friends, not close friends, but the kind you have coffee with a few times a year. When word got out, because it always gets out, the calls started coming from people who had no business calling. My dad called first, said he'd heard from Kyle's dad that there was some kind of financial dispute, and that he hoped we could work it out between us, like men. Work it out. Like it was a disagreement over a hockey pool. Said, "He stole $280,000 from me over 4 years, Dad." Silence. Then, "Are you sure?" Kyle wouldn't. "I have a forensic accountant's report and a police file number." "I'm sure." My dad made a sound like he was choosing his next words carefully. "Well, families have known each other a long time." I said right and ended the call. My brother called that evening. He was less careful about it. Said Kyle had called him. Said this was all a misunderstanding, that I'd always been the type to overreact. The type to overreact. Like I'd snapped at someone at a dinner party. Like this was a personality flaw, not a documented theft. My brother said, "Maybe you two should sit down and talk." I said, There's nothing to talk about. He's practically family. Man practically. But not actually. I said I was being rigid. I said I was being accurate. He said I'd regret burning this bridge. I said I hadn't burned anything, I'd just finally seen what was on the other side of it. I blocked his number that night, and my dad's. And 2 cousins who sent me texts clearly based on what Kyle's side had told them. I changed my personal phone number, gave it to my wife, my lawyer, my accountant, my mom, who was the only one who'd called to say she believed me and was furious on my behalf, and 3 people from my crew. That was May. By July the civil proceedings were underway. By September, Kyle had hired a lawyer of his own, and they were trying to negotiate a settlement. My lawyer advised patience. I had a lot of it by then. I threw myself into work. We had 4 active sites in the fall, 2 residential renovations in Ancaster, a commercial fit-out in Stony Creek, a basement development in Dundas. I was on the tools some days just to have something physical to do. My crew noticed I was quieter than usual. Nobody asked directly. That's the thing about guys in they give you space by default, and I've never been more grateful for a professional norm in my life. My wife kept me stable. She's a nurse, 12-hour shifts, comes home tired and still somehow managed to check in on me every single day without making it feel like she was managing me. Some evenings we'd sit on the back deck after supper with tea and not say anything for half an hour. That helped too. November became December. I'd stopped thinking about Kyle every day, maybe every other day. My lawyer said the civil case was progressing, that we'd likely see a resolution in the spring, that partial recovery was realistic. I'd mentally written off the full amount and adjusted. The business was still profitable. I'd restructured the finances with a proper bookkeeper and monthly reviews. I slept okay. Then, the second Thursday in January, someone knocked on my door at 7:30 in the evening. My wife was on a night shift. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole, Marcy, Kyle's wife, standing in the hall with a puffy winter coat and a manila envelope in both hands, looking down at the floor. I didn't open it right away. I stood there for a moment thinking about what this could be, what angle this was. Was she here for Kyle? Was this an attempt to appeal to old history, get me to soften the civil claim? She knocked again. I know you're home. I saw the light under the door. I'm not here for Kyle, I promise. That was specific enough that I opened it. I didn't step back to let her in. I stood in the doorway. She looked worse than I'd seen her in years. Not sick, just worn down. The way people look when they've been carrying something too long. I'm not here for Kyle, she said again. You said that. I need you to see something. She held out the envelope. What is it? Bank statements. His personal account and a joint account I didn't know existed until 6 weeks ago. She paused. He's been hiding money from me too. Different accounts, different amounts, but the same method. I looked at there's more, she said, about where some of it went. I stepped aside. She came in, kept her coat on, stood at the kitchen counter rather than sitting down. I stood across from her. She opened the envelope and laid out pages, maybe 15 sheets, organized and tabbed. Her hands weren't shaking. She'd made peace with whatever this was before she came here. She walked me through it quietly. Kyle had been redirecting money into a personal account that Marcy hadn't known about. Not the same account he'd used to take from me, a different one. And from that account transfers to a woman in Waterloo. Regular, consistent, going back almost 3 years. I said, who is she? Marcy said someone he met through work. I found out 2 months ago. I've been dealing with that separately. Her voice was very level. But when I was going through everything, financial records, trying to understand what we actually have, I found documentation that overlaps with your case. Money that came from your business accounts passed through his personal account and then to her. I said, that's relevant to my civil claim. I know. That's why I'm here. She looked at me steadily. I'm not protecting him. I want you to know that clearly. Whatever he did to you, whatever he took, I think you deserve to know the full picture. And my lawyer says this evidence is more useful in your hands than in a drawer at my house. I looked at the pages. Clean documentation. She'd organized it better than my forensic accountant. I said, why didn't you call my lawyer directly? I didn't want it going through lawyers first. I wanted to look you in the face and tell you myself that I had no idea, that I'm sorry, and that I'm not the same as him. She paused. Your wife was kind to me, for a long time. I know this is a lot to ask, but I needed her to know that I didn't know. I said, she's at work. Marcy nodded. That's fine, you can tell her. I took the envelope. I didn't say much else. She didn't try to make it into more than it was. She wasn't looking for absolution or a friendship. She was delivering information and making a statement. I could respect that. After she left, I sat at the kitchen counter with the pages spread out in front of me. Read through everything twice, took photos of each page. Sent the photos to my lawyer at 11:30 at night, with a message that just said, new evidence. Call me tomorrow. My lawyer called at 8 the next morning. She was quiet for a moment after I explained, then said, this changes the settlement picture considerably. The civil case concluded in early April. Not everything recovered, never is. But significantly more than the initial offer Kyle's side had proposed. My lawyer was satisfied. I was satisfied. More importantly, the forensic trail was now comprehensive enough that the police file was substantially stronger. Kyle pled guilty in June to fraud over $5,000. His sentence included restitution and 18 months of supervised probation. It's not prison. I know that bothers some people who hear the story. It doesn't bother me as much as I thought it would. The restitution mattered. The guilty plea mattered. The public record of what he did, that mattered. His family stopped calling somewhere around February. I don't know if they finally believed me or if they just gave up. My dad called once in March, said he was sorry, said he hadn't fully understood the scope of it. I said okay. I didn't say it's fine, because it wasn't fully fine. He'd defaulted to doubt when I needed support. And that's not something I just set aside. But I said okay. He and my mom came for dinner in the spring. It was a bit formal, a bit careful, but it was something. My brother called in April. Left a voicemail that was long and uncomfortable and clearly cost him something to record. I listened to it twice. Called him back. We talked for 45 minutes. He said he'd taken Kyle at his word because it was easier than believing his own brother's company had been robbed by someone he liked. I told him I understood the impulse, and that the impulse was also wrong. He agreed. We're not where we were before all this, but we're talking. That's enough for now. What I didn't expect, what nobody tells you when you go through something like this, is how much lighter everything feels once the legal part is done. Not happy exactly, not celebrating, just lighter. I'd been carrying the weight of the betrayal and the case, and the fractured family stuff all at once for almost a year. And when it was finished, I just felt the absence of all that weight. I restructured the company. Brought in a proper operations manager for the financial side. Someone with credentials, background checked, with clear signing authorities and monthly reporting. I hire differently now. Not more suspiciously, just more carefully. There's a difference. My wife and I took 2 weeks in August and drove out to Nova Scotia. We hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years. Spent time in Cape Town, drove the Cabot Trail, ate too much seafood, slept in a rented cottage, outside of Baddeck, where the only sound at night was wind off the lake, she read. I built a small deck chair that needed fixing in the cottage, just because I needed something to do with my hands. We didn't talk about Kyle or the case, or any of it, and somehow the fact that we didn't need to talk about it was its own kind of resolution. There's a version of this story where I'm bitter, where I can't trust anyone in business again. Where I'm checking accounts obsessively at midnight, and flinching every time a supplier calls with an unusual invoice. I understand how people get there, but I made a decision somewhere in the middle of all of it, that I wasn't going to let what Kyle did shrink my life. He'd already taken money. He wasn't getting anything else. Marcy, for what it's worth. I ran into her at a grocery store in the fall, Fortino's on Upper James. We ended up standing in the same aisle for a moment. She said hello. I said hello. She looked better than she had in January. She'd filed for divorce, she said, and had gone back to work as an office manager and was figuring things out. I said I was glad she was doing okay. She said thank you for not shutting the door that night. I told her she didn't have to thank me for that, I meant it. I drove home from that grocery run, thinking about doors. Which ones I'd closed on purpose. Which ones I'd left open by accident. Which ones I'd opened when I should have walked past. I don't regret any of the closed ones. Not a single one. Kyle took $280,000 in 4 years of trust. And I will probably never fully understand how someone does that to another person. But here's what I know. I caught it, I documented it. I went through the right channels, and I built something on the other side of it that he has no access to. My business is profitable and clean. My marriage is solid. My crew is good. My name in this industry is still good, because everyone who works in Hamilton renovation knows what happened, and they know which side of it I was on. Kyle's name is something else now. I live with that just fine.